Who's friends with all the night dreamers, talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's Talk Show Radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers Talk Show will fix your despair. If you want to talk conspiracies, Night Dreamers is for you. Top secret case, alien space, it's Gary with the news. Tune in on the radio, don't let Big Brother know. They're listening to everything, even Gary's late night show. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Show Dreamers Talk Show will fix your despair, because Gary's talking to you at night.
You're listening to my friend Gary Anderson on Night Dreams Talk Radio, the best in paranormal radio.
Here now, the news. I'm Guy Ticker, Night Dreams Talk Radio Network news director, anchor reporter, and Mahjong tournament organizer. The Pentagon has disclosed that the government once considered a program to recover and reverse engineer any captured alien spacecraft, an effort that never came to fruition but fueled conspiracy theories about a cover-up. The Defense Department recently released a public version of a congressionally ordered comprehensive review of classified U.S. government programs since 1945 that debunked decades of speculation about UFOs, saying it found no evidence of extraterrestrial activity or efforts to withhold information from Congress. Sure. A powerful solar storm brought northern lights to unusual places. The recent storm, visible over quite a bit of the U.S., China, and Europe, had an impact on power grids, telecommunications, and global positioning systems. Only minor disruptions were reported as the storm sent out powerful electromagnetic pulses toward Earth. The solar storm's origin is connected to a cluster of sunspots on the sun's surface. The spots are filled with magnetic fields that can act as slingshots, sending large amounts of charged particles toward Earth. The events are known as coronal mass ejections, CMEs, and are more common toward the peak of the sun's 11-year solar cycle, which will occur in 2025. The particles most often miss the Earth, but now the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency says several of the ejections are headed directly for Earth. The storm reached G5, or extreme levels, last week, causing vivid green, pink, and purple lights to be seen. While the extreme storms create conditions for the lights to expand far away from the poles, those conditions can be disruptive and a challenge for us here on Earth. So mark your calendars for 2025. And finally, this is sad to report, Roger Corman, who directed a series of cult films including 1960's The Little Shop of Horrors, has died at the age of 98. His family told industry publication Variety that he died on Thursday at his home in Santa Monica, California. His films were revolutionary and iconoclastic and captured the spirit of an age, their statement said. Jack Nicholson and Robert De Niro are among the actors he helped develop. Directors James Cameron and Martin Scorsese cut their teeth on his films. Many of his films became cult classics, and he became famous for the speed at which he worked, often making 2 films at the same location at the same time in order to save money. Roger Corman was born in Detroit on the 5th of April, 1926. His father, William, was an engineer, and he had intended to follow in his father's footsteps. However, while studying at college, he became attracted to filmmaking, and after a spell working for General Motors, quit his job and went to work for 20th Century Fox as a messenger boy. Having failed to make much progress, he set off for Europe, where, among other things, he briefly studied English literature at Oxford. He returned to the U.S. to become a screenwriter. In 2009, he received an Academy Award for Lifetime Achievement and continued to work well into his 80s, producing the 2010 films Dino Shark and Sharktopus for the Sci-Fi TV channel. The sheer quantity of films on which he worked is almost without precedent, as was his ability to find and mature new talent. Many of his films have taken on cult status, and few directors have been so successful at making popular pictures on such tight budgets. When asked how he would like to be remembered, Corman said, quote, "I was a filmmaker, just that, close quote. I'm Guy Ticker. The news is brought to you by Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. To submit a story or to get all the latest news, go to nightdreamstalkradio.com, because the truth is out there. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, the home of Night Dreams Talk Radio, with Gary Anderson, syndicated worldwide. Paranormal Talk Radio, like you remember.
Well, here it is, the 23rd of May, JC. The time is like a time warp. It is going by so fast. You know, they found something very interesting here lately. The Great Pyramids, they found by ground penetrating radar something very strange under the Great Pyramid. And they don't know what it is, but they're going to find out. Maybe it's a UFO.
Oh, yeah, wouldn't that be something? But listen, there's been many theories and lore of many things that could be underneath that pyramid. So I hope they get the okay to find out more about it.
I would like to know because, you know, again, we've heard everything from various guests. It could be a water pump. It could be this. It could be that. Or could it be a transmitter? Or who knows what it is? But, yeah. You know, again, some people still think it was built for the pharaohs. No, that's not what it was built for. You know, the pharaohs used them, okay? But that's like, hey, there it is, a cemetery. I'm going to be planted there. You know, also in the news, an engineer who designs the grid system has said today that, well, it's a matter of time before we lose the internet and we lose the grid system. And we blew it back a few years ago for a few $1 billion. We could have shored up the grid. So if we got hit, we wouldn't lose the grid or the internet. But no, Congress didn't want to spend the money. Now to shore up the grid with our economy, you know, with inflation, we're talking trillions of dollars.
Well, here's the thing. If they don't fix it, because when it does happen, it's just a matter of time, not a matter of if, it will. It will be like those shows, The Walking Dead. People will tribe up. There will be chaos and mayhem and loitering and just everywhere. I mean, after about 3-4 days, forget it.
No, I'm not going to go to my local Wally World and buy toilet paper because they'll be totally sold out. And you know, there'll be a riot for toilet paper.
Exactly. Do you not remember the toilet paper wars of 2020? Not to mention everything's got shut down. You can't talk, travel, or anything.
Well, you know, even at that same time, food was very short, like meat. You go into, you know, your major grocery store, at least here on the West Coast, even getting meat was short. Even getting canned chili, of all forgotten things. You could even find that in some of the supermarkets because everybody was hoarding everything.
And to think, for a few dollars up front, you could have shorted up, fixed it up. But no, they got to spend like $10,000 for a hammer and $3,000 for an aspirin and stuff like that.
I don't know, but I tell you this. We're almost out of the toilet paper my wife bought during that time frame. She bought so many cases of toilet paper. I mean, you know, and there was a guy, seriously, a few miles from where I live, right there out by the freeway entrance. He was selling toilet paper for $5 a roll.
Yeah, and then the guy that tried to corner the market on the hand sanitizer, that was something.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, he got busted by the government for that.
I know it.
Interesting. We got a great guest. Here's a little bit of information.
Dr. Bruce Rapuano earned a BA degree from the University of Pennsylvania, where he majored in neurobiology and minored in psychology, a Ph.D. in neuropharmacology from the University of Connecticut, and a J.D. from New York Law School. Dr. Rapuano has conducted independent biomedical research as a cell biologist at internationally recognized medical institutions, including the Memorial Sloan-Kettering Cancer Center and the Hospital for Special Surgery, both located in New York City. He's authored or co-authored 30 scientific articles in peer-reviewed medical journals. He's published articles on topics such as the role of membrane phospholipids in nerve function, the skeletal effects of cancer metastasis, metabolic bone diseases, and the coordinate surface electrical and biological properties of titanium alloy implant materials. Dr. Rapuano has also worked concurrently as a medical research scientist and associate radiation safety officer at the Hospital for Special Surgery. Most interesting, however, may be his book, Dominion Lost, a scientist's own alien abduction, a bombshell nonfiction book which is the only first-person account to date of UFO alien abductions authored by a mainstream American scientist.
Well, Dr. Bruce, how are you doing?
Doing great, Gary.
Well,
nice to be with you here today.
Well, I'm glad you're here because I'd be just watching TV if you weren't. Now, I got to ask you a question, Dr. Bruce. How old were you when you got interested in like ETs, UFOs? Was it a TV show by any chance? What happened?
Looking back, remember the story of Betty and Barney Hill.
Right.
Right? And I remember when the article that described their encounter came out, I think it was, I don't know if you even remember the magazine. It was called Look Magazine.
Oh, yeah.
And they described they had an interview with Betty and Barney Hill. And when I read it, I was fascinated. And for some reason, by the time I finished that article, I was convinced. I must have been 13, 14 years old at the time, but I was convinced when I read it at that time that they were telling the truth. I don't know how I knew that, but I think I could trace my interest in the phenomenon of UFOs and later alien abduction to reading that article in Look magazine way back when in the late 60s, actually.
Oh, yeah. I remember that magazine and Life magazine. That tells you how old I am. Yeah.
That tells you how old we both are, right?
You're young enough to be my son. Now, again, did you ever have any strange UFO sightings or anything when you were young? As a kid?
Fascinating sighting I had, to tell you the truth, was in 1965, because one of the reasons why it was so remarkable was that there were multiple witnesses. We were playing a game of kickball in our front yard. It was a beautiful night in the middle of summer. I would say at the beginning of summer, June 19, and just happened to see this out of the corner of my eye. I was the only one who saw this brilliant, huge ball of light out of the corner of my eye. And I went to take a look at it, and I saw what looked like the biblical Star of Bethlehem. But it wasn't a point source of light, Gary, like from a plane or helicopter, star or planet. This was literally 2.5 times at least the size of the full moon. It was right on top of us, and we all gathered around to watch it, and it was utterly silent, motionless, and the strange thing about it was, at that moment, everything became silent around us, whereas before we could hear, the sound of the crickets and grasshoppers. Usually at the time of the night, the sound is deafening. Nothing. I looked away from the object, and I looked back, and I still heard nothing. So they call that in the UFO investigation field the Oz effect. It's very strange sensation around a close encounter with the UFO, and it actually the whole experience got even stranger. But I don't want to give away the whole story, but that was quite a remarkable close encounter that was like nothing I experienced before or afterward. And I don't think I'd ever seen anything reported like it in the literature in terms of its size and its appearance. That also had multiple witnesses, Gary. Very, very unusual.
Yeah, myself, back in the, was it about mid-70s, I was coming back. I took a job in North Carolina, and on my way back, we drove nonstop from North Carolina to Seattle. And we got into the desert in New Mexico, and there was this bright light in the middle of the night. And I was speeding. I had a GTO. I liked going really fast in it. So I figured, oh, God, I'm going to get pulled over. It's a police helicopter. I get out of the car. Not a sound. Not a single sound. And the light was so intense. And then, poof, it was gone. And that gave me, that back then, I really didn't think much of it other than I was scared. And my wife at the time, she was freaked out. But years later, when I thought about it, I go, something was really strange. Back in that time frame, I don't think the government had something like that.
I'm with you, Gary. That's exactly my impression of the UFO close encounter I had. So close. Think of the energy. It was so bright you can barely look at it, and had to have some type of a power system, propulsion system that didn't create any sound. That created all this excess energy in the form of light. And I know at that time we didn't have any technology like that. As I talk about it in the book, it certainly had a power source of immense power to it because it gave off so much light. And that's one of my conclusions about this particular incident, this particular experience that I discuss in the book. That I'm convinced that way back when in 1965 we didn't have no government or military on Earth had any technology like that could produce that type of phenomenon, which was not a natural phenomenon because after a while it began to move in a course where I watched it move in a southwest direction, didn't change its altitude, its direction, its speed. So it was clearly exhibiting controlled flight. So it was definitely an intelligently controlled object, not a natural phenomenon, but like you were just alluding to, nothing that was man-made certainly at that time in the 60s.
Do you remember how big it looked or anything like that, or the shape of it? Or?
Not only bigger than the full moon from point to point, it had several asymmetric points like the point of a star. That's why I call it the biblical Star of Bethlehem configuration. But 2.5 times the size of a full moon. So clearly this was not just an encounter, but a close encounter. I estimate that it might have been no more than 500 feet from us, above us at the time. And again, I've seen nothing like that from that vantage point. I've seen strange lights in the sky, but nothing that was as close as that particular UFO.
Interesting. Do you remember the color of it or anything like that?
Bright white light. But interesting, after we're watching it for 30 to 60 seconds, as if by a flip of a switch, it just turned off so fast I can't even describe how fast it happened. And in its place, I can only describe it as a fireball, the size of a dime held at arm's length. And interesting, in the 60s, I saw a number of UFO sightings where first a bright star-like object was seen, and then at other times the UFO had the appearance of a fireball. So this kind of resembled that particular UFO report that was very common in the 60s. And I talk about those series of sightings that, particularly in the summertime and early fall of 65, right, that followed the sighting I had in June, that had those particular features to it. But it actually, the red fireball is what I watched drift away from us. That's the first time I noticed it was starting to move was when it had transitioned to the fireball appearance, and then I watched it disappear over the horizon. But certainly, again, both features of it have convinced me that this was a technology, but it was not our technology.
Bruce, how did it change your life at that age when you saw that?
Boy, when it happened, I knew it was something I'd never seen before, and I probably would never see after. And I committed every detail of the sighting and everything that transpired, all the conversation, around it, all the conversations we had about it after it had left. And I knew that it was something that, frankly, because I've been reading for a couple of years, all these reports of circular, silver-colored they called them flying saucers at the time, in the UPI, United Press International, Associated Press, national articles. And I was convinced that what I had seen was part of some broader phenomenon. At the time, I was only 10 years old. I didn't really have a clear understanding of what it represented, but I knew, I guess I had a feeling deep inside that this was something that was originating from outside the planet, but I didn't know from where it had originated. But at that time, I knew it was unidentified. I knew it was probably from somewhere else, but didn't really have a clue as to what the nature of this phenomenon was at that time.
Bruce, did you actually, after you saw that, did you talk to your parents or a friend or anybody and tell them what you saw?
It's strange. For some reason, maybe we were all a little frightened that this was so strange. We discussed it immediately after it had disappeared over the horizon, shared notes, what did you see? What did I see? What did you see? And we kind of, shared that information, but then never spoke about it again. The only time I spoke about it was, I think it was 3 years later. I told some of my classmates, and I wrote a little paragraph or two, and everyone in this class was asked to write a story in French. Mine was the story that was selected to read, and I read the story. I remember describing just what I described to you. I remember the teacher, when I was through reading my story, looked at the class and said, I can barely breathe. It was that compelling a story of something unknown that, we started to hear about flying saucers at that time, but it was something that I realized struck a chord with people, that this was something clearly outside the normal human experience. But beyond that, I never really discussed that sighting or any of the other experiences I had until I wrote the book. And it's strange, but I can't really explain. Maybe because at the time, Gary, and in the decades after the 60s, there was such an air of skepticism and even ridicule that was, demonstrated on the part of the media and the government, and particularly the military, against these types of sightings and experiences. And that may be the reason why I've refrained from discussing it too much.
Well, back then, I'm going to be honest with you, people were scared. Like I didn't tell anybody what I saw. I kept it really quiet for years and years and years because, if you say, hey, I saw a UFO, people at that time frame would backstep a couple, look at you from head to toe, and what they were thinking, like, this guy maybe belongs in a mental institution. And that has all changed now because people do, there's still some people who are naive that believe we're not the only ones out there. But, it's something I didn't tell you. After my encounter, years go by, and I go into a surgeon because I was having problems and I needed to have some surgery done. So I go into the doctor, and he schedules, the CAT scan and MRI and all this stuff. And then I go back in for my appointment. I walk into the doctor's office, and the nurse goes, when you were in the military, did you get shrapnel? In your neck, down, I can't remember where. And did you? And I said, no, I shattered my tailbone, but no, nothing. And I get into the doctor, and we're talking. He goes, would you take off your shirt? I want to check something. And he's looking at me. And he goes, I don't see any scars. And I go, what is going on? And he goes, you got a piece of metal in your, vertebrae. And I freaked out. And I go, and he goes, when you were in Vietnam, did you get any shrapnel? I go, no. And then I freaked out. I said, can you remove it? And he goes, yeah, but you'll be in a wheelchair. But that, again, I kind of like blew that off. I went and had my other surgery. Years go by. One of my kids gets in trouble for drugs, and I have to go to Pierce County Drug Court with him for a year. And every time I would go in, I would set the alarms off.
Wow.
And then a couple times I had to go fly, and I set the alarms off. And then that's when I started putting things in my head. Something must have happened with that night when I saw that light and I stood out there and it was so intense and poof, it was gone. Something happened.
Did you have any missing time associated with that?
Again, I didn't wear a watch and my GTO didn't have a clock at work. I don't know. I don't know. I was like a starry, weird look, when I was looking at this light. I couldn't figure out how anything could be that bright. And it was just, something happened.
What was the shape of the shrapnel?
God, I don't remember. It was like, it was bigger than a grain of rice. I remember that. It was kind of weird shaped.
Gosh, it's amazing, Gary. I'm going to briefly allude to experience of someone I know from the military who was a radar operator and has a similar strange metallic object that showed up on a CT scan in his head, and had a period of missing time that he can't account for. Now I'm going to segue to my experience, which kind of I think is going to resonate with you.
Okay, we what we need to do is take a break for the station.
Oh, okay.
And then we come back. I want to find out what happened to you. So we'll be back with Dr. Bruce right after this. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. Check out our website for more information about our guests at nightdreamstalkradio.com. We'll be right back.
To just be heard. You remind me, yeah. You remind me, yeah.
From best-selling author Paul Wallace, The Invasion of Eden. Did our ancestors warn us about ET invasions? And is history repeating itself in the 21st century? The standoff between the Pentagon and the U.S. Congress has exposed a dark web of secrecy surrounding UFO retrievals. The Invasion of Eden explores archaeological sites, biblical and ancestral narratives from around the world. Probing military intelligence, ancient indigenous knowledge, and sources close to prime ministers and presidents, Paul asks, what are the signs that our civilization may be on the cusp of a whole new world of ET contact? Laura Eisenhower says, The Invasion of Eden is a must-read book in these most critical times. Eric von Daniken adds, Paul Wallace is a brilliant author. I have full respect for him. The Invasion of Eden, in paperback on Amazon, April 9th. This Friday, live on YouTube, find out about car repair scams.
Oh, you're gonna need a lot of parts.
On Night Dreams Talk Radio. Coming to you live from the Night Dreams Talk Radio studios and broadcasting this worldwide.
When we were little kids in the fourth grade, 1970, 4 or 5 of the kids in my class were held back, and it was revealed to us by the government that there were 70 ET species known to be visiting us.
It's Gary Anderson, the man who delivers the dish.
The 4 species they were aware of were the tall grays, the small grays, the amphibians, and the Nordics.
Now, sit back and get ready for a ride you won't forget. I mean, how could you?
They're interdimensionals in time ships and not extraterrestrials in spaceships.
And we're just getting started. And now, here he is, the real deal himself, Gary Anderson.
And we are back with Dr. Bruce. Now, what happened to you?
Gary, this is probably the strongest memory I have of all the experiences I would place in this alien abduction category, because I think they're all connected. Again, when I was 6 years old, I had a memory, just a fleeting, like a flashback of I call it a metal ball, maybe 2 to 3 millimeters in diameter, silver in color. I have told the story a number of times, with studs or projections on it. But I also had a related memory, and the memory was that I was told that if I sneezed or blew my nose too loud, that this could come out of my nose. That's how I gathered that this was some type of a nasal implant. And the fact that I felt as a child of 6 years old when I first had this memory that this could happen if I did something wrong, that I might get in trouble. So the emotional context, the background to this particular memory has convinced me this was a real experience. And going along with that, there have been a number of abductees that have had memories of having a very similar device, very similar structure placed inside their nose, inside their nasal cavity, or removed while they were on board a UFO in the middle of an abduction event. And I've also had the experience, as they have, of unexplained nosebleeds. I had an experience of missing time at that same age of 6 years old. I didn't know what I'd been doing all day, and suddenly had a strange, severe nosebleed. I didn't know until I went to the bathroom and saw streaks of blood, from both nostrils. Not only that, when a year later I had been having ear infections, I had a tonsillectomy. I had my tonsils removed and my adenoids. My ear, nose, and throat surgeon had told my father I had a scar in the back of my throat behind my nasal cavity, suggesting that I had some type of medical procedure. So it all ties in to reports in the literature where other abductees at the same age of 6 years old had the same accounts of having strange nosebleeds, memories of implants, having doctors. In one case, there a boy, again, at the same age of 6 years old, had been examined by 2 separate physicians that found this scar behind the nasal cavity. And I attribute this to the aliens trying to implant some type of a brain-computer interface that I think is part of the program where they're trying to study our brain function. So that's a lot to unpack, but that's essentially, my story that kind of is in line with what you might be reporting, assuming that this type of experience is something you've had as well, in terms of not only having a sighting, but perhaps alien abductions. But again, that's speculation on my part.
Again, too, with implanting, again, like we talked before we went on the air, they're doing it without our permission. They are getting deep into our thoughts. And again, that's like rape, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I don't know what they're trying to do. Are they trying to control us, modify us? Something is going on. Now, I don't believe, some people say, well, they're collecting our DNA. And, you're in the medical field. How many times do they have to keep collecting DNA? I mean, couldn't they just keep reproducing it at a certain level or a certain point? Or do they have to replenish the DNA at a certain point? But something is going on. I've had other people claim that they were taken aboard a craft. They were, opened up while they were awake. They were prodded. They were poked. They were, you name it. They went through an enormous amount of pain. And whatever is going on, it is really scary.
Yeah, but I agree. It's a violation. We're being treated by what I think is some advanced alien civilization as guinea pigs. They're doing experiments on us. But I'm impressed by the consistency between all the abductees that claim they've had some type of implant while on board a UFO somewhere in their head, inside the ear canal, behind the ear, underneath the eye, and very often inside the nasal cavity. And either they can remember being on an exam table and a device like a probe with a little metallic ball on the end of it is inserted into their nose. When that probe is removed, the device is the little ball is gone, indicating there was an implantation, or vice versa. The probe is inserted into the nasal cavity, and when it's removed, the abductee can now see that something was removed that looks like a metallic sphere. So it's when you look at the broad UFO and UFO alien abduction literature, the similarities from account to account are striking, and in particular with respect to this issue of having implants inserted somewhere in your body. But it is very frightening. Unfortunately, I didn't have any fear at the time, and no trauma that resulted from it. But it's hard to believe this is done for our benefit.
That's the whole point. Again, if these ETs, aliens, or whatever they are, grays, if they were here to help mankind, wouldn't they have helped us when we had the virus here? Wouldn't they have helped us to stop the wars? I mean, whatever they're doing, they're not doing it for mankind. They're doing it, I think, to benefit them, their race.
When you look at the state of the world, what I say in the book is that if they're here to help us, if they have a stake in the planet and our species and our survival, maybe our introduction and then acceptance into the cosmic community of advanced civilizations, we've never needed more help than now. What are they waiting for? To intervene and do something for our benefit, whether it's to intervene in the middle of a pandemic or to intervene to stop a third world war. It's a question I ask. If they're here for our benefit, what are they waiting for? So that's why I think that they're here, whether it's as part of agenda to utilize our natural resources, utilize us as a species, and for some reason, basically all I can do, all anyone can do, is to speculate at this point.
And that's the scary part. And then again, we have, Disclosure Project, which really hasn't even, I'll be honest with you, I look at that as a farce, because I've been hearing about, disclosure is coming for over 50 some years. And so far, we haven't got really any information other than a few people coming out and saying stuff. But I've heard that for many decades. I'm really concerned about the people that have been abducted, what it has done for their life, because a lot of them, I'll be honest with you, after they've been abducted, it's changed their life, and not for the good for a lot of the people, because it does something to you emotionally. I have talked to so many people that are scared to go to bed at night. Even Whitney Strieber, when he was on our show a couple of times, what he dreads more than anything is going to bed at night. And you always have to worry, am I going to be taken?
And, the insidious part of this is the fact that, I could excuse the government if in the interest of national security. Perhaps they've been successful to some degree, reverse engineering some of the alien technology, and they want to keep that a secret from our adversaries. I understand that, and I'm sympathetic to that. But when I hear accounts where either abductees seem to gather this information, that or maybe this has come out from some of through the whistleblowers, that it's not our government, it's the aliens that don't want disclosure to happen, that they want to keep their agenda and their purposes and what they're doing here hidden from the very people they're conducting experiments on. I think that's the most frightening. I can handle the government, but when I hear the aliens are putting pressure on the government that knows a lot more than what they're saying, to not divulge it to us, the free citizens that pay our taxes and pay the salaries of our government officials and the people that work in the Pentagon. That's very alarming to think that that's the reason why we're not having disclosure. I hope that's not the case.
Well, another thing I'm going to jump on, I've had so many people, and ufologists come on my show and they say, well, the ETs will never allow us to have a nuclear exchange. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want to bet on that one because they haven't done anything. If you look back in history, if you look all since man started from Cain and Abel, what have we done? We killed each other. And I don't think they would stop it. I mean, yeah, that's the scary part. Maybe they're collecting our DNA and modifying us for maybe to remove us, a certain group of people, from when that day comes. Mm-hmm. I don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes me skeptical about their motives when you think of what happened at the Malmstrom Air Force Base, where we had our ICBMs all turned off in unison. 10 missiles were inactivated when there was a UFO sighted overhead, or in Ukraine, I think it was also in the 80s, where in opposite to that, a UFO was sighted over missile silos where all of the missiles were turned on, and the launch codes were starting to be entered. And until they were able to shut the system down. So what's that all about? It sounds like more of a potential threat to us if we don't fall in line in terms of what their motives are. That they're letting us know what they can do to us with our own technology. So as you said, that. Those reports make me also skeptical that they're going to stop any nuclear war from happening. So we really have no evidence at all that they're doing anything for our good.
Well, if you really look at it, you have cattle mutilation. Now, some people say, oh, it's the military doing it. I don't think so. I think there's like anything else. You got some hoaxers that probably did some stuff. But again, if you really look at cattle mutilation, there was one a couple years ago in Oregon where a pathologist went out and then checked the bull afterwards. And he said that bull was standing when the eyes were removed and all this stuff was going on to that poor creature. It was still alive and standing by the way that the liquid between the eyes and the brain ran out on the nostrils. It was not laying down. It was standing when it happened. So whatever is going on, they don't, if it's cattle or humans. And again, too, there's been cases in South America and other places, who knows where else. Because I've seen something, a friend of mine at one point was retired from the CIA, and he showed me some pictures of human mutilation. And when you look at this type of stuff, it makes you wonder what in the blankety blank is happening out here.
Well, there's I'm going to come back to my book. There's a chapter in my book that discusses the very real possibility that, we always talk about this multi-generational aspect to the abduction program. That if you're abducted, your children are likely to be abducted. If you're abducted, your parents might have also been abducted. And so there's a lot of evidence that this tends to run in families that maybe for genetic reasons, the aliens are interested in working with certain bloodlines. But I talk in the book about the possibility that my grandfather had a very strange sinus infection where he had a blood clot in one of the sinuses that led to his demise. It spread to the meninges of the brain. He had a meningitis that became fatal. And I present a lot of evidence that, if this happened as a result of an implantation, if he was, again, like me, an abductee, in the 30s, there were no antibiotics. And there was nothing to save him from an infection that might have resulted in an implantation procedure gone wrong. So that's one of the, adverse effects of this abduction program that we never talk about. You don't hear much about. We don't hear about the abductees that maybe never came back, were never returned to terra firma, and how many might have lost their lives in this particular alien program is anyone's guess.
Well, if you look how many people go missing in this country, this world, that, again, according to the statistics with the FBI, they do find at least where like 3/4 of the people they can eventually account for, but there's still a huge amount that vanish every year with no trace. And that doesn't even make sense because nowadays, back 20 years ago, Bruce, you could disappear. But now, because of the internet and everything is so sophisticated, you can't hide anymore. So something is going on where people are vanishing. And again, maybe they're being taken, maybe who knows what's happening to them. That's the scary part.
I think of all the sightings in Alaska. There's so many UFO sightings in Alaska, abduction reports, and I heard an unbelievable number that there are tens of thousands of people that have been missing from Alaska that have never been found. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but many people have discussed the possibility that the disappearance of the Malaysia airliner had something to do with this particular alien phenomenon. So we don't know. This is, the more we think about, all these different events that are maybe tied to one another, it becomes more and more frightening.
Now, some of these people, have you ever checked into some of these people that have been abducted and go back if maybe their kids were abducted or their father or their grandfather was abducted and checked and see what profession they went into after their abduction, what their IQ level was, and did it advance in their family line more than a normal family line?
The only way I can speak to that is to say that for some reason after an abduction I had when I was 12 or 13, I became fascinated with the function of the brain. And not only that, by I would call extra abilities, extra cognitive abilities. We call them extrasensory abilities. And I began to read everything, and I could. And actually, one of my teachers let me talk to the class at that time as a 7th grader about the subject of ESP, which we didn't know as much about then as we know now. Remote viewing programs and so forth. And I became fascinated with the function of the brain, studied it in college, and then went on to get an advanced degree in neuroscience. And I always wonder whether or not seeing these UFOs and being an abductee had something to do with this particular this very specialized scientific interest that developed into a career for me.
That is a very possibility. That is my curiosity, because a lot of people, I found there's 2 types of abductees that have been implanted. Timothy Collin, JC, you remember what Dr. Roger Lear, what patient was he for his implant removal? Do you remember?
Number 9.
Number 9.
He was a podiatrist, I believe. He was a podiatric surgeon, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yes. And he's had a lot of implants analyzed. Some of them have had some very peculiar properties, electromagnetic, but he's also claimed that one or more of the implants that he's removed, have not only biological tissue attached, growing into it, attached to the implant, but in one case, nerve tissue, which was very strange to see an implant, in the foot or the lower leg interact with and actually have attached to neural tissue. So he's had some very interesting findings from his work with alien abductees and implants.
Yeah, and like with Timothy Collin, it was tissue attached to it. It formed, but the other part is when it was sent to the lab, the metallic it was made out of, it is on Earth, but the compound, how it was put together, could not be done on this planet. Yes.
The radioisotope ratios, and clearly the conclusion of the analytical scientist was that there are no materials on this planet that occur naturally with that particular chemical composition. I remember being very interested in those findings when I first heard of them.
Yeah, it is again. Now, since have you gone to a hypnotist or been regressed at all and found out any more information about what happened to you?
Well, the answer is no, but what's surprising to me is the number of people that, like me, have reported all their abduction experiences and all of their accounts because they were consciously recalled, as I can in my case. In fact, I won't say the majority, but a very sizable percentage of abductees didn't need to go through regressive hypnosis. Now, I have to acknowledge that regressive hypnosis has been shown to be a very effective tool and can reveal more of any particular abduction experience, will allow the person to remember more of what happened during any particular experience. I haven't had that particular procedure with a licensed hypnotherapist, but certainly something I'm considering for the future.
Yeah, that's another thing too, is because again, if you go to somebody who's not certified and not trained the right way, you could go in there and all of a sudden now you have all these thoughts in your head that never happened because, as we grown up, you have Star Wars, Star Trek, all these movies, all these B movies since the 50s, right? Of aliens and spacecraft and all this stuff. You absorb it and it's in your brain. And if you get somebody who's not trained professionally, you can come out of there and now all of a sudden you believe all that stuff is intertwined with what you've seen all these years.
Well, Gary, that's the next point I was going to make, because that's what I'm afraid of. It's so embedded in our popular culture that I would really be concerned that it would contaminate that regressive hypnotic therapy sessions. That's why I want to point out that most, if not all, of my experiences that I report on in Dominion Lost were before any of this was in the popular culture. In fact, I report on an abduction experience where I was lying in my bed as a 6-year-old and saw a strange UFO, strange-looking plane, which was very shiny, had a highly reflective surface. Next thing I knew, I've gone to sleep and woken up inside a UFO, surrounded by alien beings, and dozens of them. And I was on an examination table, and they resembled almost identically the classic gray alien, 3.5 to 4 foot tall, disproportionately large heads. But that experience was actually 2 or 3 months before Betty and Barney Hill were abducted. So none of this was in the popular culture at that time. So where did if that didn't happen to me, I have no idea where that particular experience could have come from if it was a result of a child's imagination, which I doubt very strongly at that time.
Did you have any brothers or sisters at all growing up that could have maybe been abducted too?
I have one brother. I've talked to him about this at length, and he does not remember anything that would lead me to believe that he's had experiences that are similar to mine. I can't explain that, and I don't know if for some reason due to trauma that happened to him, that I really didn't experience that his experiences are buried, deep in his unconscious. But he has not reported anything to me like what the experiences that I've had. So I can't really speak to that in terms of my family.
What made you decide to write this book?
Well, I was concerned about all these things we've talked about this evening. The fact that, I was convinced the abduction phenomenon was real. The reproductive program is real. I'm wondering what the implications are for the human race. And I noticed that there's so much attention on the technology, the fact that there are UFOs flying all over the world. They're dominating the skies. They have free reign over the earth. And our government has in trying to reverse engineer the propulsion system for these particular UFOs. But nobody's talking about the alien beings, the nature of the aliens themselves, who they are, what their nature is, what their agenda is. And I wanted to bring more of a focus on that, and also bring it, maybe draw the attention of the scientists, more people in the scientific community. Very, very few scientists are actively studying this, and I hope that if I came forward as the first mainstream scientist to talk about his alien abduction experiences, that it would persuade more scientists that this is a real phenomenon worthy of scientific investigation. And so that's probably an overarching goal of my book, is to influence not only the general population but the scientific community to take a more of an active role in investigating this particular phenomenon.
I'm willing to bet you.
Disclosure, I thought, was here, so I thought this might be a good time to release the book.
And I'm willing to bet you there's a lot of people in the medical, in the science, that have been abducted, and they're scared to come forward because, they're worried about their career or what it could do to their career. So I commend you for stepping forward and doing this. How long did it take you to write the book?
Probably a year to a year and a half. Now, Gary, I have two books. One book just talks almost exclusively about my UFO encounters and alien abduction experiences. That's the abridged version. The longer version is kind of science heavy, has quite a few chapters of scientific analysis where I explain the nature of the implants, the energy they use, what materials they're made of, and how they might work in the brain, and what their function might be, whether they're brain-computer interfaces that might be used to allow the aliens to gain an understanding of how our minds work, perhaps for the purpose of being able to control us.
That's the scary part. Bruce, we're going to have to get you on for part 2. You know that. We need to get you back.
I love it.
Do you have a website, or where can they find your book?
Well, it's on Amazon, and I can be also contacted, or you can see what's going on in terms of my books and public appearances on Facebook. But I have an Amazon book page, Dominion Lost, The Scientists Own Alien Abduction Encounters. And also, I welcome any questions or comments sent to my email, which is the title of the book, dominionlost@gmail.com. So anyone can feel free to contact me there.
Okay, my friend. Well, you have a great holiday, will you?
Thank you, sir. Same to you. And it was great talking with you. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, Bruce, you take care. And thank you so much for coming on. Okay. Well, we're going to be talking about Bigfoot next. So stay tuned. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. If you're listening to us on your favorite radio station, or on Apple or TuneIn or iHeart or one of the iHeart radio stations, well, now is the time to switch over to YouTube, because we're going to end the feed for the radio stations because, well, it's going on the top of the hour. So everybody, will catch you on YouTube. Just go right on there, go onto YouTube and type in Night Dreams Talk Radio. So we'll be right back with part 2 of the show.
You remind me of something I can't find with words. You remind me of what it's like to just be heard. Yeah, you remind me of, yeah.
Now, the latest news from the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network Newsroom. I'm Guy Ticker. Dateline, Salt Lake City. Are there extraterrestrial beings or paranormal activity in the state of Utah? Well, the U.S. Department of Defense might have an answer. Might. A recently declassified document from the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which is part of the DoD, mentioned unidentified anomalous phenomenon and included a section of Utah. I'm Guy Ticker. The news is brought to you by Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. To submit a story or to get all the latest news, go to nightdreamstalkradio.com.
to be a graying tower alone on the sea. You became the light on the dark side of me. Love remains a drug that's the high and not the pill. But did you know that when it snows, my eyes become large and the light that you shine can't be seen? Baby, I compare you to a kiss from a rose on the grave. Ooh, the more I get of you, the stranger it feels, yeah. And now that your rose is in bloom, a light hits the gloom on the grave. There is so much a man can tell you, so much he can say. You remain my power, my pleasure, my pain, baby. To me, you're like a grown addiction that I can't deny. Won't you tell me, is that healthy, baby? But did you know that when it snows, my eyes become large and the light that you shine can't be seen? Baby, I compare you to a kiss from a rose on the grave. Ooh, the more I get of you, the stranger it feels, yeah. Now that your rose is in bloom, a light hits the gloom on the grave. I've been kissed by a rose on the grave. I've been kissed by a rose on the grave. And if I should fall by a rose on the grave, I've been kissed by a rose on the grave. There is so much a man can tell you, so much he can say. You remain my power, my pleasure, my pain. To me, you're like a grown addiction that I can't deny. Now won't you tell me, is that healthy, baby? But did you know that when it snows, my eyes become large and the light that you shine can't be seen? Baby, I compare you to
Looking for Bigfoot or UFO themed merchandise? Look no further. Explore Night Dreams Talk Radio's store for an array of paranormal goodies, from t-shirts to mouse pads to socks to whatever the heck that thing is. Don't miss out on these unique items. Check us out today at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. While you're checking out the cool merchandise, go to the latest news tab to find out what's going on in the world and outside the world. Again, go to www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. Coming to you live from the Night Dreams Talk Radio studios. Buckle up, Buttercup. It's gonna get bumpy.
Well, I have a source high up in SETI that confirms to me that they, in fact, have received interplanetary signals.
It's Gary Anderson, the one and only inside info impresario.
Not a normal array. It was kind of a pulsed array, and that it was kept secret and covered up. The SETI people are furious.
And now, get ready to blast off.
The guy who told me that was the founder of the SETI project. A man who had been one of Carl Sagan's best friends, the best man at his wedding.
Of course, because with Gary, there are billions and billions of possibilities. And now, here he is, the one, the only Gary Anderson.
And we are back. And my wife said we're lucky that there is only one of me. I don't know if she meant that in a good way or a bad way, JC.
Maybe there's only the way. I don't know what to say on that one there, mister.
I don't know. But, again, abductions. Dr. Bruce really, he really has a good set of balls to come forward and to announce to the world about his abduction. Again, a lot of people, in the medical, scientific community don't want to talk about it because they're scared what it could do to their career.
Yeah, that's true. Much less talk about their own personal experiences with it. That's a whole nother level.
It is. What are we going to be talking about next, and who's our guest?
Well, let me tell you something. Our guest is Fred Roehl. Now, he is a Curyung Tribal Council member from Dillingham, Alaska. And let me tell you, he has had a not-so-pleasant encounter with the Alaskan Hairy Man, otherwise known as Bigfoot to us people down south here of Alaska. Now, today he collects reports. Not all good, let me tell you, from people who's had encounters with these things on his YouTube channel, Alaska-Sasquatch.com.
Well, how you been, Fred? It's been a while since you've been on.
I'm doing good, Gary. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Again, so many people I've talked to, they are so convinced that these hairy men, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call them, skunk ape, or I got some names to call them after my encounter, I'll tell you that. But, they say they would never hurt a human being. They give off orbs, and they want to be friends with humans. And they offer trinkets and all this stuff. But, maybe that's the case for some. But, a lot of people I talk to, the ones that really had a bad encounter won't come on the air because they just don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I think it has to do with the further north you go as well. You know what I mean? Because it's so extreme up here as far as the seasons. Like, it's the end of May and the leaves just sprouted. And pretty soon, into July, mid-August, they're going to be turning yellow again. And I think it has to do with our extreme environment. Sorry, I'm out in my backyard and the bears are out, so I'm not distracted, but I'm distracted slightly just for my own safety. But
now wait a minute, Fred. Are these the bears that would look at you and say, "Oh, I am hungry"?
Yes. Yeah. That just coming out of hibernation. I'm sure the salmon ain't running yet, so I promise I won't be on their menu this evening. That's for sure.
Do you have any friends? Maybe we should send JC up there about this time next year, and you can, what you could do is offer to do his laundry and throw a salmon in there while it's, being washed, and he can wear it, and we'll see what the bears do. They'll think he's a giant fish.
Potentially. But I honestly, I think the aggression thing has to do with our extreme environment up here and the little bit of time we have to gather resources. It just makes for meaner critters. And plus, all that talk of forest friends and stuff. Our oral history says otherwise. They are not our friends, and they will steal your women and children and eat you. Is what I was always told by my elders, and I'll go with what they said. Not just because of my own personal experience, but people send me their reports. They call me all the time, and there's honestly hasn't been one good berry picking moment where they were teaching somebody how to weave a basket or trying to be someone's friend.
Well, but there is people out there, like we talked before and you were on, that actually believe they can telecommunicate with humans. They would never really hurt anybody. They might throw some rocks because you're in their territory. But, again, I'll be honest with you, my encounter back in the early 2000s, honestly, if I would have stood my ground, I would not be talking to you right now. I know I would have been, either dinner or dead or whatever. I mean, I saw every sign of aggression. And people have to realize, Fred, they weren't brought up with a mom and dad with education that learned kindness and loving and all this stuff. They're not humans.
No. And you know, the sad part about it is it kind of muddies the waters for those who may live in areas where they're not nice. And so some people may be getting a false sense of security and going out unaware, thinking, oh, it's just a Sasquatch, it's my friend, it's there to protect the forest and what have you. And that's not necessarily the case. At least not up here in Alaska, I could tell you that much.
Well, tell that to the relatives of all the missing people that have vanished in Alaska, Washington, and Oregon, and Idaho, and Montana, and who knows where else. I mean, where they've encountered something and never came back. I mean, you know, I don't think a bear could take a 30-06 and wrap the barrel around a tree.
I haven't seen it, and I've dealt with plenty of bears, Gary. Let me tell you, I used to work predator control, bear control for the village of Aleknagik, and not one bent my rifle. You know what I mean? It's a dangerous thing, in my opinion, for people to think that it's just going to be okay. There's, historically speaking, you know, through our oral tradition, they have never been our friend. There's never been anything good that comes of it. And I would just warn people, man, be careful. You may not necessarily want to have that encounter you think will be just some fanciful, you know, magical moment. That it's typically not how it goes. There's usually screaming and running involved.
Yeah. And peeing your pants too, I can tell you that one. But yeah, you know, here's the thing. You know, you have all these cable shows on Bigfoot. Okay, you have people on YouTube and podcasts out there talking about, you know, that Bigfoot are not aggressive. That, you know, they would never hurt us. And then you got these naive people. Oh, you know what? Let's go. Hey, Johnny, you know, that's his son. Johnny, let's go out and look for Bigfoot. And they go out in the woods, and they don't have no protection. They're probably not even smart enough to have bear spray, but let alone they're out there. And just think about how many people don't come back because they're stupid and go out there because of this other stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely... anyone that calls me and says, hey, I'm thinking about going out in the woods and looking around, the first thing I tell them is you really don't want to do that. Not to keep them from discovering something for themselves. It's just in good conscience, I have to warn them, you got to be careful what you wish for, because it's an ugly thing. It really is. To have something so large aggressively stalking you. For example, I was just talking to a gentleman the other day. Him and his wife and his little 6-year-old daughter were out just this last fall berry picking about a quarter mile from their cabin where they fly into. And in that quarter mile, this thing aggressively stalked them, kept coming up close, trying to get within arm's reach of their daughter. He was armed, and he only fired 3 warning shots, but that's when it got the closest, trying to come up and basically snatch his daughter. Now, to me, that's not friendly. That is definitely not something a friend would do. And, you know, they had to go a quarter mile, and that ain't very far. But when you're in the remote tundra and you got something that's just, you know, behind the black spruce, growling, throwing stuff and trying to snatch your kid, I guarantee you anyone else that deals with that would not ever consider even thinking about them in a friendly light. And again, I'm strictly speaking on Alaska because, you know, down the States, you guys have had a longer history of, you know, the pioneers and, you know, a couple hundred years of people, you know, going through there, while up here, our population is so much smaller. And the points of contact are usually where we gather resources, berry patches, hunting, fishing, you know, things of that nature. So there's like a direct conflict when it comes to those, you know, those locations, and it's damn dangerous. It is very, very dangerous. And I would just warn people to, 1, be careful what you wish for, and 2, don't play yourself cheap. Go armed. You know, go with something that you can protect yourself with, because, you know, there's so many that go missing. 500 to 2,000 every year up here, Gary.
Yeah, no, some of it, they got lost. Maybe they fell and broke their leg. And let's face it, that's another thing. If you're going out there and you're out there without a satellite phone, I don't care if it's in Alaska or Montana, for example, that's your death warrant out there. If you're out in the middle of nowhere and something happens to you, you're not going to get back to your car. You're not going to get back to civilization unless you're very lucky. And these people, a lot of them I've talked to for the years, they go out by themselves. They go out there. I got a jackknife. That's all I need. They're not going to hurt me.
Yeah. Well, remember our last conversation when you had people call in, there was that lady from Colorado that was rather upset because she went out by herself all the time, seen one and never had a problem, which is, hey, great for her. But I think she was missing the point that it's not like that everywhere. And to go into it thinking that everything's going to be okay is just, it's foolishness in my opinion. But again, I'm strictly speaking from, my experience here in Alaska. It's a totally different dynamic. Things get ugly fast, even without the hairy man. Right now I keep looking around because there's a bull moose that is no less than 5 times tried to stomp me to death this year. So I keep my eye out for him mainly. I would hate to have to.
You got a lot of things besides Bigfoot. You got like the moose, you got bears, and I don't know what other critters you have out there. But, again, if people are out there in Alaska, for example, looking for Bigfoot, I hope they're smart enough to be well armed and have some people with them. And even then, I don't even know if you're out there with a friend or two, and if they decide you're in their territory, I don't think that you'd be safe, would you?
No, I wasn't. Luckily, we were in a little shack, but we weren't safe. There's 3 of us. We were all armed. 2 of us were basically incapacitated, but when that coin is flipped, Gary, sometimes they just make noise and scare you out of there for sure. And then there's the curiosity, sure. But then there's that other side of the coin where they're all out trying to basically get you. And that's no place anyone wants to be. I shot one with the 30-06, man, 3 times center mass. It did nothing. It did absolutely nothing. The thing didn't even flinch. It just stopped moving forward. But, yeah, you definitely gotta be smarter than and not just go on feelings over something you've never experienced.
You got to blame it on, again, these shows. The odds are, to find a Bigfoot, unless you're in an area where they're at, okay, and where there's been a lot of reports. You can go out every day for years and years and never find one. I honestly feel too, depending on where you're at, because of the population is growing. People are building houses out farther. They're building farms. They're building, things. And I think this, like anything, like where I'm at 25 years ago, there was bear and there were a lot of deer here. I haven't seen a bear in years, and very seldom do I see a deer. That's because they have moved on to somewhere else or they have died off. Now, again, with Bigfoot, I think it's the same way. They kind of have to go farther out. But just like Alaska and even in Washington, there is so much in Washington State in the National Forest, no human has ever stepped foot.
Yeah. And, you have a valid point, with the population kind of pushing out and moving, further into the woods and stuff. Luckily up here, we're not dealing with that kind of expansion on the level you guys are down there. We have 788,000 people statewide and a state big enough to hold 19 others. So, the population difference is another driving factor, I think, as to why there's a lot more aggressive interactions up here. Alaska's different. Like the sun won't set tonight, Gary, until 11:04. And, we're about a month out from the solstice. And that on that day, it's going to be like 21 hours of daylight. And technically, it doesn't get dark at all. It just stays light for days on end. You know what I mean? So there's so many different things about Alaska that make it so vastly different from people's experiences, let's say down in Oklahoma or Florida or what have you, anywhere else, basically. They don't have the same dynamics that we have up here. It's just such an extreme place. It's hard to put into words unless you've experienced it yourself,
Well, if I was younger, I'd go looking for gold, I'll tell you that. But, again, that has its own risk. But here's the thing I find here is, like, people, do you get people out there from the lower states that go to Alaska and they're looking for Bigfoot? And what type of encounters have they had, if you've heard of any?
I haven't heard of any. You'd have to be very, very brave to just jump on a plane and come up here blindly and go out into the woods for any reason, Bigfoot or otherwise. It's a rugged environment. I mean, I'm in my backyard, less than 100 yards from my house, and I can't even see my house from here. You know what I mean? So it's dense foliage. I mean, the forests are dense. I mean, grant you, there's more open spots, but to just go squatching in Alaska, that's the people I do know that go, they're from here and they have a good idea of what they're doing. They're outdoorsmen. But in general, I have not heard of anyone just coming up willy-nilly and going squatching. I unless they've done it and didn't, not everyone reports to me. By all means, I don't know it all, but I haven't heard of it.
That's what I get frustrated on these TV cable shows. They don't go to Alaska looking for Bigfoot. They go in Florida. They go into Oregon. They go in Washington and film. Why don't they go where there's been reports of these creatures that are not friendly, and spend some time investigating it and maybe come back with some real stuff?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because, a couple years ago now, or a little over a year ago, Discovery Channel was up here and I recorded with Expedition X, and they were where they were going recording or whatever. I was like, hey, I got fresh reports of just down the road a little ways, but if you guys really want to do something, we can go right over here. I got a fresh report, 2 days old. They wanted nothing to do with what I was talking about. They already had their show planned, so I just did my part and went away.
You mean their show was scripted, probably?
I can't speak on that, but I know my portion of it, which was like 45 seconds because they didn't like me because I despise them. I told them I'd only do interview style questions, Q&A, and I wouldn't participate in anything scripted and no shenanigans, basically. So, that kind of, they haven't called me back since, but that's fine with me too. But yeah, it's sickening because they don't care about the truth when they come up here. All they care about is ratings for the show. And if they can hype up some garbage, they'll do it. If it's easier to hype garbage, they would rather do that versus go out and do some real stuff. You know what I mean? Because I willingly was willing to take them and just, hey, we'll go over here, Trapper Creek area, and, see what's happening over here. But they want to know parts of that, Gary. They really don't.
Well, again, a couple of years back, going about 3 years ago, there was it's probably still on the Travel Channel, a ghost hunting show. And one of the main stars of that show was going to come on my show, but then at last moment, he got scared about being sued. But what he told me is there's been cases where they went out to investigate, for example, on hauntings, ghosts, right, in a prison. And they're there for like 2 days. They come back, they have nothing. The producer would yank his hair out and say, you go back and fake it. We need material to air. And he got to the point where I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to go out there and fake something. And that's what happens. You know, a lot of these shows, I'm not going to say which one's on Bigfoot, but you watch it, right? And all you hear is, oh, there's something over there. It's all hype. And again, maybe they don't want to go out there and encounter a real one because, again, then that would put it to where they have to then start trying to prove that more even yet. I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of those things, Gary, where they want that perfect moment, like the Patterson-Gimlin footage of Patty walking away, safe distance. From my experience, I went to an encounter location one time, and this thing started growling at us about 40 yards away, just behind the black spruce. When you experience something like that, your primal instincts kick in, as you well know, Gary. You know, no one had to tell you to run, right? So when something like that happens, that people just don't realize how it traumatizing and the impact it has on someone's psyche when.
Well, it does, and it does affect you. Boy, we just lost his signal. Anyway, let's take a break while we get him back. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. Fred, we're going to take a break. I see you're back. Okay, we're going to take a break for 3 minutes. We're going to come back, and maybe you can give us some reports. How's that?
Sounds good.
Okay, we'll be back with Fred in about 3 minutes. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. Again, you know, if you're out there looking for Bigfoot, I don't know. I would bring a whatever. You want to have protection. We'll be right back. And I'm not talking about a condom either. So we'll be right back.
Never was a quitter, tasted like a raindrop. She's got the look. Heavenly bound, cause heaven's got a number when she's spinning me around. Kissing is a color, her loving is a wild dog. She's got the look. 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 What in the world can make a brown-eyed girl turn blue? When everything I'll ever do, I do for you. And I go la 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 la. She's got the look. Fire in the eyes, naked to the bone as a lover's disguise. Banging on the head drum, shaking like a mad bull. She's got the look. Swaying through the band, moving like a hammer. She's a miracle man. Loving is the ocean, kissing is the wet sand. She's got the look. She's got the look. She's got the look. Everything I'll ever do, I do for you.
Looking for Bigfoot or UFO themed merchandise? Look no further. Explore Night Dreams Talk Radio's store for an array of paranormal goodies, from t-shirts to mouse pads to socks to whatever the heck that thing is. Don't miss out on these unique items. Check us out today at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. While you're checking out the cool merchandise, go to the latest news tab to find out what's going on in the world and outside the world. Again, go to www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. This Friday, live on YouTube, find out about car repair scams.
Oh, you're gonna need a lot of pot.
On Night Dreams Talk Radio. Deep in the Amazon jungle, one man.
Hi, I'm Stan Gordon. Check out the Night Dreams Talk Radio with Gary the Big Guy.
Yeah, let me finish. One man.
Hi, I'm Mark Muncy. Check out Night Dreams Talk Radio with Gary the Big Guy.
Yeah, do you mind? One man, naked and afraid.
I'm losing my mind.
You and me both, sister. One man, Gary the Big Guy. No boats, no lights, no motor cars, not a single luxury.
Hey, any more and you'll have to pay a royalty.
Okay, that's it. Hit it! From the summer vacation studios deep in the Amazon jungle, from that tree right there. See at the top, he's swinging.
I'm losing my mind.
Twice? All right. Coming to you live, for now, on Night Dreams Talk Radio, naked and afraid, Gary the Big Guy Anderson.
And we're back. You know, I just kind of noticed, JC, that intro, live for now. I wonder, you can take that two ways, like our audio or being physically alive for now.
Well, that could go either way. If you keep jumping from tree to tree naked, you're going to be finding out, I got a feeling.
Well, especially when you fall on a branch and it goes somewhere.
Yeah.
It gives a new term to, well, an afternoon or a morning woody.
Or a hole in one.
Oh, yeah, or a hole in... Well, yeah, that too. Well, we're back with Fred. You know, again, I'm sure you got many reports you get on a regular basis. What is the scariest one? Let's start off with that.
Well, the most recent one that's really, I mean, terrifying when it comes down to it. There's a doctor out of Anchorage who was building a cabin, and what ended up happening is this thing basically unplugged his generator. He went out to take a quick peek to figure out, he figured the little slab of wood, he put it on to keep it level, kind of slept over from the vibration, but that wasn't the case. This thing was standing there, you know, about 10, 15 feet away. He bolts back inside. So what ends up happening is this thing throws the generator at his cabin, breaks part of the wall, and he's basically stuck inside this little cabin, and I believe it was a 10 by 12 or 10 by 14, something like that, little caribou cabin. And he was stuck there for a couple of days. And at one point, this thing was looking in the window at him. He had shot through the window once at it. While it was away, he ended up going outside and putting one of his boards that cover the windows when he's not there on that broken window that he shot through. And I mean, this thing was brazen. It was there during the middle of the day. And so once he was back inside after putting the board up, because as he was putting it up, there's a mossy, wet piece of grass that hit the board just above his head. And this thing was 60 yards away when it threw it. He, you know, hauled butt inside or whatever, but he ended up sitting there next to the wood stove. And this thing was at the window across the way, totally ignoring him, but like looking in the window, looking around almost like a home inspector would, you know, just kind of checking things out. But yeah, it just to be stuck somewhere. I know that feeling, to be stuck in a cabin, and really you got to wait. You know, that to me is terrifying, especially when it's obvious it doesn't want you there. You know, there's also a report of a lady, very similar circumstances. Her husband, a pilot, he was off flying around looking for a different source of water or something. Something had happened with their water source that they had, and he was trying to fly around and find something suitable to just fill some jugs and boil it later. However, while he was gone, only for a couple hours, for 2 hours and 32 minutes, I believe she timed it. But this thing was walking around their cabin, banging on the walls, tried the door a couple times. She had shot inside. Her rounds didn't go through the door, but it was very similar. She had to sit there, and this thing would peek in a window and peek in another window and go and try the door. And to be a woman, at least she had the right state of mind to have a gun. But I just feel sorry for her, because when she was expressing to me about what happened, I mean, she was literally blubbering and crying, which I totally understand. But it was literally trying to come in the door. And from the feeling she said she had, it wasn't there to, you know, play a pickup game of kickball or weave a basket. It was there for business. You know what I mean? And thankfully she was armed. And man, her husband to this day, you know, this happened about 5 years ago or so, but her husband to this day has a hard time leaving her side because of it, because he feels so guilty. And he was just trying to get some water, you know, but they were unaware. They were unaware of the potential dangers. And that's another driving force for my YouTube channel, is to get the word out. You know, I don't care if anyone believes it. I don't give a rat's butt, you know, but just trying to get the word out to be aware, because not all is good in the woods. That is for sure.
Well, it's a good way to die, being tore apart, or even worse. But, you know, even that time, if I remember right, you were in the cabin, and, you know, if they really wanted you, could they just come through that cabin door or just tear the cabin down?
100%. And I think the only reason they didn't, Gary, is I started shooting right off the bat. I think that changed their overall tactics, because initially we were lured out and that didn't work because we saw 3 of them and we ducked back in. And moments later, I was shooting through the wall, and the rest of the stuff they did that night was almost like checking to see if we were going to shoot again. You know what I mean? They were kind of testing the waters when they ran around and ran off and all that kind of stuff, you know. But once we left there to the riverbank, that's when they chucked that rock at me, and that's when I shot the one with the 30-06. And I mean, for something to not go down with the 30-06, Gary, is it's very hard to grasp, because we killed walrus, you know, with that same rifle, 2,200-pound walrus dead, you know, a shot or two, big brown bears dead, moose dead. This thing just took 3 shots, and only thing it did was stop moving forward. So it's
it's scary. I'm also looking behind you, by the way, to make sure if I see a bear, I'll tell you real quick. But, you know, here's the thing that, again, people are so naive that they think that these things would never attack you. And again, if you're in their territory, you're just like anything, you know. They're preying, they want to eat. And I still have a feeling, because after talking to a couple of medicine people with a couple of tribes up here in the past, you know, they talk about going back in the 1800s where the Bigfoot would, you know, come through and take the women and babies, and then they would find bones and parts of humans. It makes you wonder, you know, what is going on. But again, there's so many people out there naive to say, oh, they wouldn't. But they don't look at you as a human. They just look at you as anything else. Like, look at what we do to cattle. You know, when you have that T-bone steak, if you went in a slaughterhouse and seen how it was killed, you probably wouldn't eat meat after that. At least a lot of people wouldn't. But these things are not humans. They don't think like a human. Now,
well, the Otna natives down in the Copper River Valley, their oral history as recent as the 1970s, there was some elders that were out hunting and saw a group of these things over a ridge, and they were basically by piles of human bones. And I mean, you know, if the locals are telling you, hey, they're dangerous, you gotta take that for a fact. You know what I mean? I would rather trust a tribal elder over a book in a library any day, Gary. And the majority of the oral traditions up here are, these things are your enemy. They will steal you and eat you. And it's not once did any of my elders tell me otherwise. You know what I mean? And not once.
Well, like you were mentioning that couple with their daughter, you know, a small daughter, that'd be a perfect, you know, there's dinner.
Yeah. And it was actively attempting to come and grab her. He said it was so big, he was scared to shoot it, but he had to do something. He was, you know, shooting just above it. He said it was about 9.5 feet tall. He said it was pretty skinny looking. But again, that's irrelevant when this thing's over 9 foot tall, you know, and trying to grab your daughter. You can't reason or negotiate with something like that. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just, I wish people would get over their cognitive dissonance and these fanciful stories of forest friends, because if they were really worried about the forest, then there would be no coal miners. There would be no oil exploration in the, in some of these places where there is, or gold mining or any kind of development whatsoever. If they were truly friends of the forest, we wouldn't have Western expansion. You know what I mean, Gary? They would have nipped that in the bud, centuries ago.
How about these people go in Alaska, panning for gold, or strip mining for gold, or whatever they do? I mean, has you heard any stories from them with any encounters at all or anything?
Yeah, down by Hope, just south of Anchorage. There was a young couple that was going to do some mining with someone they knew, and they ended up, the woman ended up having this thing stalking her. They ended up having to fire on this thing. It followed the younger couple out of there, and they were running back to the person that they were gold mining with, the one who had experience. And this thing basically followed them out of the trees, actively trying to get this woman. And, we were actually, the night that we were just talking about with my experience, we were there to prospect gold. There's something I wonder if there's something to do with gold mines in these things, because look at the Ape Canyon story. And then there's several other ones, 40 Mile River or 40 Mile Creek up here in Alaska. There were some guys who were doing their little, they had their little powered sluice with the little suction hose, little 6-inch hose. And they were basically diving down and sucking material off the bottom. And the guy that was up top, keeping an eye to make sure that the sluice was running right, was getting bombarded by rocks to the point to where he had to duck under the water. And they basically, treaded water and walked in the creek and in the river up to their chest to avoid this thing that was actively trying to run them out of there. So there's definitely reports of them coming around mining operations. There was some from over off the Yukon River as well. Some reports. A guy was, basically up on the top of a tank farm waiting for help to come. And periodically I gotta check my 6. The known areas of travel for the moose and the bear I keep an eye on. But there's definitely reports from the miners. That is for sure.
Yeah, that again too. How about the sounds? What type of sounds do they make? Ron Moorhead captured what he called the Sierra sounds. Right. Is that what you've heard? That type of sounds too? Do they communicate between themselves?
Yeah, I've heard that. Not to that level. A lot of times up here, like last year, me and my buddy, I call him Squatch Bait, we were over by Willow Mountain, just north of Hatcher's Pass, and there was those types of noises, but they were just almost out of earshot, just out of range. And we started trying to follow to see, where's that noise coming from? And these things will make those noises. They'll imitate owls, squirrels, songbirds. Basically, they can mimic just about anything, even other people's voices. There was a report of from this guy Arvell and his wife Myrna. They ended up losing their dog. This thing snatched their dog up by Devil's Pass down on the Kenai Peninsula. But this thing imitated Myrna's voice with inflection, tone, and everything 100% accurate, to where Arvell, when he heard it, he thought it was his wife's voice from behind him echoing off the brush in front of him. And then they realized too late that it was this creature because it snatched their dog. He said from the looks of how his dog was grabbed, it was dead instantly. This thing, the way it grabbed it, it broke its neck. And then the thing took off up the mountain and was knocking snow off of the trees as it cut back up through. He spent time after that trying to hunt this thing down to get revenge for his dog. It didn't quite work out the way he wanted to, but these things are known to imitate, crying babies too. My cousin, she's in her 80s now. Elizabeth Osterhaus, that's her maiden name, but her name now is Elizabeth Cook. And they had, back in the 60s down on Alaska by Dutch Harbor, they had one of these things imitating a known baby, a baby known to them try to lure them out. You know, they ended up, catching on in time. And our other cousin that was there with her, they went and hid all the kids under the bed in the bedroom because this thing was staring in the window at them, and it's creepy how accurate they could be. But what's weird about that as well is it'll also morph from very accurate owl hoots, let's say, to an obvious imitation. So it's kind of weird. It'll start off authentic sounding and natural, and then it progressively morphs into more and more obviously mimicked, if that makes sense.
Well, Ron Moorhead, when I had him on the show numerous times in the past, I also had one of his friends that went up to his camp where he used to, have his encounters. And they had a backpack in there with mules. There's no roads, no logging roads or anything. And at night, they swore they heard a car door open and close. And that really scared him. Okay, we just lost his signal for a minute, and hopefully he'll be back. But think about that. You're out in the out deep somewhere, and all of a sudden you hear a car door open and close. Wouldn't that be scary, Fred?
No, it would be. Actually, we've heard very similar things, and we've also heard what sounded like gunshots off in the distance, but there was no hunters. You would be able to see from where the mountain was behind us. You hear these gunshots, but we knew no one else was up there because we were the only ones on that trail, if that makes sense. Just the level of it's amazing is what it is. It's truly amazing that these things have that ability. At one point, I heard them making owl hoots, but also simultaneously with that was this click popping sound. And it was very, very creepy to say the least, but it was also awe-inspiring how accurate and detailed the clicks and the pops were, but it was also simultaneous with the owl hoots. It was two separate sounds coming from the same sound, and each one was very accurate. It was very sharp and crisp. Just amazing, but scary as hell, but freaking amazing that they're capable of that. It's almost like they're capable of multiple octaves all at the same time. Even some of their screams that they do are just hellacious because they'll be so low, but yet high pitched where you want to cover your ears at the same time, but you're feeling your pant legs jiggle from, the super low tones.
Do they roar? Do they make a roaring type of sound?
Yeah. I've heard the roar about 4 separate times over the years, and it's like a mix between a lion, a bear, and a Tyrannosaurus Rex, man. It is powerful. I've heard plenty of bear roars, and it's not a bear. You know what I mean? Because some people say, oh, you just heard this, or you just heard that. I know bear roars. I've heard them growl, roar, fart. I've heard it all from bears, and they're not capable of making these types of noises that these things are. It's just so loud and so prolonged. It's not like it's just a short growl or roar. It is prolonged and it's projected. You know what I mean? It is loud as shit.
Did they ever warn you off with any type of yipping or any? Have you ever noticed a same type of pattern, maybe from different creatures out there, that they have the same type of pattern when they come across somebody to kind of like warn you off with a sound?
Bears will chomp their teeth, and sway their heads and stuff. But with these things, every encounter is relatively unique. Usually when the scream is usually the overall warning. You get the scream or a howl off in the distance. And if you don't leave, then it escalates from there. You know what I mean? But most people, when they hear that, they get the hell out of Dodge. But then again, we don't hear all the reports because some people just don't come back. You know what I mean?
That's the problem. Yeah. That a lot of people don't come back, and they fell in a canyon, they did this or that, but no, I mean, there's been times where they found, like hunters, their hat, some of their clothing, their gun, but no hunter, no bones, no nothing. So
no signs of struggle or anything. There was a report from he's current law enforcement, but he was sharing a story with me about from when he was a younger man, long before he was in law enforcement. But they had two separate hunting camps about 7 miles apart, and we'll call him Johnny. Johnny stepped outside to use the bathroom and never came back. And the powers that be showed up to look for him, and they found what they thought was the impression of a bear track. But bears don't just snatch you up and run 20 miles. Bears, there's a sign of struggle. There's a blood trail. There's torn clothing. There's telltale signs of a bear attack, because they won't take you very far, and they'll half bury you at the surface and, defecate on you and urinate on you and lay on your corpse until it's eaten. They don't take you 20 miles away or just totally gone. There's always signs, when it's a bear. Well, and, they chalked it up to a bear took him.
I'm going back when my uncle, was attacked, when I was a little kid in Mount Shasta, believe it or not, had bears back then. And he was literally tore up. He thought he had the kill shot. He fired his gun and it didn't kill it. And before his son was with him, and before his son did get the kill shot, he was tore up. And usually on a bear attack, they literally start tearing you up. They're not going to drag you away. There's going to be parts of you there, and you're a lot of blood. So, I mean, to be no blood, I mean, it tells you somebody snatched you.
Yeah, and bears don't care. Bears, they don't care if you're dead or not yet. If you're not moving, they'll start eating you. You could be still alive, screaming for help. They're going to start tearing into you and eating you. They're not phased emotionally by getting a bite to eat. You know what I mean? So it's an easy cop out is what it is, Gary. It's a very easy cop out to say bear predation, bear got him. That's why, and then the bones were scattered to, the woods and the rest of the critters. Yeah, that's very easy form of dismissing it. You know what I mean? And then that way no one's, culpable. Like, the police don't have to, or the law enforcement don't have to search anymore. They already figured it out. It was a bear, even though there's no sign of the person, no sign of struggle, just gone. And it's unfortunate that they have those types of cop-outs. You know what I mean? I wish it would be a little more critical when it comes to the reporting of these things, because some things don't add up, for someone to just disappear, never to be seen again, and all their stuff just gone or all there, it just doesn't make sense to chalk it up to something like a bear attack when it's obvious it wasn't. You know what I mean? There's just too many telltale signs of bear attack.
Well, if somebody, is out somewhere and they run across a Bigfoot, what should they do?
Get out of there. Get out of there. Don't run, but don't hang around. I wouldn't hang around. I haven't had an experience up here to where they came in quietly. Usually there's a scream involved or growling, breaking of branches just out of sight. And typically up here, if you see one, there's typically more than one, and the one you see is a distraction. So, man, try your best not to get yourself in a situation. But again, the encounters are so random in nature. Someone could have an encounter on their property up here and go 40 years and not have another thing happen, or, hunting in the same spot for 45 plus years, and then 20-minute experience, they never hunt again. So I would just, I would back away quietly and, watch your six getting the hell out of there. I would not tempt fate. I would not tempt fate at all.
How about if you made one mad at you? Have you ever got any reports where somebody shot one and then all of a sudden they kept having encounters with that.
Yeah, there was one guy. He shot at one out of fear, and it killed all 15 of his sled dogs over the course of 4 days. So yeah, you got to be careful. And if you do, try not to shoot out of fear, which I totally understand why it happens. You know, I mean, there's a monster in the woods. But what I would recommend is try to avoid shooting it if you can, and back out of there. You know, get out of there as quickly and quietly as possible, and be prepared to be followed. Just keep calm, and get out of there as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Typically they'll escort you out, but if they want you, then you're not going to be able to tell your side of the story.
Now,
as simple as that.
I'm going to ask you a question which I know you've been asked 1,000,001 times. How come we don't find any bones from one?
Well, there's a couple schools of thought on that, and one is that they bury their own, and the other school of thought is that they get cannibalized by the others, and there's no bone left. Kind of like a hyena will eat bone, wolves will eat bone. It's been said that these things do as well. So there's a couple schools of thought, either buried or they're cannibalized on by the rest of them, and they eat the bones too. So, and if you ever seen some of those studies they did with they chained a black-tailed deer to a tree and filmed it, and within 7 days, there's absolutely nothing left of it. Just nothing. It's gone. I mean, all traces of a dead animal there are gone. It's actually an amazing thing. Nature will reclaim everything. It's just a matter of time. So, there's different ways to view it. It doesn't dissuade me that there's no bones. I've seen these things, so I know they're out there. You know what I mean? But, how often do you find predator bones in the woods? At one time, I found a dead black bear, and that's like the lottery of finding a dead carcass. You know what I mean? Because you typically don't come across dead predators. You just don't, unless someone shot it and left it on the trail recently. You don't find dead predators. It just doesn't usually happen. It's very rare. So I'm not shocked why there's no bones found.
How long would a body of a Bigfoot or a human that has been attacked by Bigfoot, how long would it take before before it's all gone? You mentioned a deer, but
yeah.
That's scary.
I wouldn't suspect all that long, to be honest with you, Gary. Because up here in Alaska, there's a lot of different critters that would feed on that. You got the pine marten, the ermine, bears, the smaller black bears. There's wolves, coyotes. There's a lot of predators that it wouldn't take very long, honestly, for a body to disappear and be just decimated, spread out to where you'll never find a trace of it. I wouldn't see it being more than maybe 10 days, maybe, depending on where you're at, honestly. But, it wouldn't take all that long.
That's really scary, too. But again, what you're saying is if you're out there going looking for Bigfoot, be armed, go with a bunch of people, have a satellite phone, and honestly, hope you don't actually run into one.
Right. And maybe we use the Garmin InReach to where we can't make a call, but we can send a text message. And every time we go out, like on an excursion to actually look for evidence or what have you, we have at least 3 separate people that know where we're going, know about when we're going to be back. And you got to cover your bases. Just don't play yourself cheap. You know what I mean? Just cover your bases,
Yeah. Any other things you can tell people, what if they want to go out looking for Bigfoot, what type of equipment should they actually have?
Well, I would start by saying be careful what you wish for. But a good action camera that can start recording quickly, good flashlights, very high caliber weapon, and nerves of steel. You know, a lot of people think it's like the Patterson-Gimlin footage where it's at a safe distance, kind of quartering away. And that's typically not how it happens. It's usually you're going down the trail and all of a sudden it's right over there staring at you, you know, and there's such a, there's a mental thing that happens when, even for those of us who have seen these things, when you see them, every time you see them, it's not the same. It's shocking to the system on a level that's just, if someone says it doesn't bother them, I'm concerned about their mental well-being. You know what I mean? Like, they may want to get evaluated, but no, it's scary. You got to be careful what you wish for, and go armed. Go with enough people that if something happens, you know, there's other people that can help basically defend you. You know, yeah, it's one of those things, man. You just can't play yourself cheap.
You know, I still have nightmares from my encounter. You know, not often. Well, if I watch a freaking thing and there's a Bigfoot movie, for example, I'll go to bed that night and it reminds me of my encounter. And I'll tell you what, and then for the next couple nights, I can't get a decent sleep because I keep having that dream. And, you know, it was probably the most horrible thing, the most scary thing I ever had in my entire life, other than my first wife. I tell you, you know,
that's fair. That's fair.
And you know what I do? Every time I think about it, I can still smell the smell. It was so pungent. I'll never forget that smell. It was like the strongest, like the most horrible, horrendous smell I ever smelled.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I would say be careful what they wish for. To each his own. People are going to do what they're going to do, and they could, you know, take my advice with a grain of salt or dismiss it all they want. But I personally, I would just be very careful, and I wouldn't expect to come across anything. I mean, to be honest with you, what seems to work best for people is when they're doing other activities, they're not actively out there whooping in the woods or banging a tree with a stick, you know, that kind of thing. That's just hokey. That doesn't do anything. But you know, if they want some excitement, maybe record children playing and play it on a Bluetooth speaker while you're out there.
That might do it.
See what comes to inspect the little kids playing. You know what I mean? Because that you just got to, man. Jeez.
Yeah, we got a caller. Let's take this call real quick before I let you go. Go ahead, caller.
Okay.
My question to your guest is, I know in the past he's talked about the fact that he and his cohorts were carrying 30-06 rifles, but have they, and I'm sure he probably has, carried 12 gauges with slugs for protection?
Yeah. I actually, at the beginning of that night in 06, I shot through the wall initially with the slug gun, and then it screamed and the whole place shifted. I love a good shotgun. Yeah, I really do. And I think it's more shot placement versus necessarily the caliber. So if you'd have to, I would say, you know, if you could see the neck, go for the neck, the groin, the thigh, you know, or good eye shot. But I don't think it's necessarily the caliber, you know. I think it's more the shot placement. But when I fired the 30-06, I didn't have any eyes to shoot at. It was just a big black mass over in the trees, coming out of the trees. So I just went for the biggest target. You know what I mean? But I think it's more shot placement versus anything else.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you telling me that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
How can they find your YouTube channel and anything else you want to share?
Oh, it's under Subarctic Alaska Sasquatch, and the website's the same. I have an interactive map of Alaska to where they can zoom in on a marker pin And when you click on the marker pin, it'll bring up a little synopsis, and it's also embedded with my YouTube channel. So you just got to click on it and it'll play the corresponding encounter video from that area. But that's the easiest way to find me. And on my YouTube channel, there's, I advertise my email addresses and my phone number and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not hard to find. I mean, if an 80-year-old woman in New Orleans can find me, then just about anyone could. You know what I mean?
Okay, my friend. Hey, I want you to have a great holiday. It's coming up, will you?
Oh, definitely, Gary. Thanks for having me on. I sincerely appreciate it. You and James both. And I'll do my damnedest, that's for sure.
Okay.
Trust me.
Okay, watch out for any bears behind you, okay?
Oh, yeah. Don't worry. I got that covered.
Okay, my friend. You take care.
All right, you guys too. We'll see you guys next time.
Okay. You have a good one. Well, JC, think about it. Have you ever really went out and looked for Bigfoot?
I have. I must admit I have. The first time was probably in 96. There was a big flap down around the Salt Fork area. There was a big rash of sightings and this and that. And I said, I had enough of this. I'm going to go find out, Gary.
And what did you do? I mean, what did you do? Seriously. Mm-hmm. I mean, what did you prepare yourself for? Were you one of the people that went out there with no bear spray, no protection? You just went out there with a couple of guys with a can of beer and, okay, here, Bigfoot, or what did you do?
First of all, I don't like going with too many people that would get shot by them, but listen, I had something that had a couple of clips that were staggered so I can quick change and load, and also had a pretty good caliber of pistol. Listen, there's things out there. Here used to be wild dogs, packs of wild dogs that tear you up, and coyotes too. But anyway, I found out what they were reporting, these sounds and these things and all these noises. What I found, because I came head to head, I could hear it coming, Gary, and I ducked down behind this log, and we was going to come to a head. It was me and Bigfoot. Only it turned out to be a peacock, because all these farmers had these peacocks and they got loose and they're running wild in the woods making ungodly noises. And that's what it was.
Oh, turkeys are just as bad too. You know that.
Wild turkey.
But you think of all these people, you've been with me for a couple years as my producer, and I'm sure you remember all these people. Yeah, I went out there looking for Bigfoot. I went miles out there. And I go, well, did you have any I don't need protection. They're not going to hurt me. Now, they're lucky they didn't have a real encounter.
Yeah, listen, I wouldn't feel comfortable being in one of those big predators without a couple of them clips staggered and duct tape ready for quick, because, listen, things are on you quick. Even a bear can travel 30, 40 miles an hour, and you can walk right by them, not see, and they just pounce on you. You're done.
Yeah, well, again, you got Bigfoot, you got ETs, you got all these other things out there. Which one, if you were going to encounter, would you be more happier to run across a Bigfoot or an ET? Which one would you prefer?
I don't know. It depends on the situation, but I would probably rather see it if I know I can see a Bigfoot without having to wrestle him or kill him. Be killed. That would be something, but I don't know. I think either way it could be dangerous either way, so either one doesn't matter.
See, that just what frustrates me. There's so many naive people. ETs would never hurt mankind. Like I said earlier in the show, they would never allow a nuclear exchange. Bigfoot would never hurt mankind. They telecommunicate. They want to help mankind. Okay. Come on, like I keep saying, a Bigfoot is a Bigfoot. Look at orangutan. Look at the big ape. Look at the apes up in the Andes. All this stuff up there. Okay, come on. If you ran across one of those, they would tear you apart.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Humans are thinking that these things are like humans do, and they don't, or act like humans do. And if you want a perfect example, how many people was in the news from the 90s and 2000s, especially the lady in Connecticut, that had these chimps for years and turned on them and killed them and tore them up? You remember those reports?
Oh, yeah. Well, again, when I was talking to the medicine woman years ago with the muckleshoot, when she was talking, folklore of, stories that was passed on generation to generation in the 1800s, they feared the hairy man because what they did, they came in, like I said, through the village and they grabbed the women and they grabbed the babies, or they're down at the river, doing their whatever they're doing, and they would come in and grab the babies and even the women and run off with them, and then they would find the remains. Just because it was the 1800s, okay, does not. Oh, by the way, I said the word okay. I apologize for that word. But if you think about it, they, from 1800s to now, they don't go to school. They're not going to learn anything different. They're going to have the same pattern they did in the 1800s. So if they see, hey, at dinner, like Fred said, that young little girl, they were trying to coax that little girl, get the girl. They're not doing it to, make her marry one of them. It's going to be dinner because you know what? A small one is a small prey. It's easier to get than an adult.
Very easy prey. And I'll tell you something else. A lot of reports people can't see, even though they're looking for them, that are old back from the 1800s, because they didn't call them Bigfoots or Sasquatch. They called them like the Wild Man and the Woods, or different names you had to interpret. But there is a report from the Salt Fork, and it made the newspaper, and a lot of different documentaries from the 1800s. One of these things did attack a man. He was in a wagon and somebody else. And I think it killed one of them, but they went on a hunt for this thing. They got a posse and everything, And there's been many other reports like that throughout the country, but you got to read between the lines. They call him maybe Wild Man or the Naked Hairy Man in the Woods or whatever. They ain't call him Bigfoot.
Yeah, well, again, December mentioned about an elk hunter was ripped up by a grizzly. You are so right. But, I go back to, my encounter with my friend who's a doctor. When we got back to the car and managed to get out with our lives, and we drove down up in the Canadian Rockies, and we went maybe 15, 20 miles. I don't even know how far it was. And we found like an old country type store up there, and we went into it. And, the guy knew we were really emotionally, out of it. But, what really scared me more is when he said that there was a guy and his wife that went out hiking. She either sprained or broke her foot. He went to get help. It was just a matter of 2-3 hours when they got the rescue people there. And when they got there, there was not much left of her because the bears, the grizzlies, they had dinner.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Listen, they can smell blood and fear, and they're going to zoom in on that like sharks with blood in the water, Gary. They're very opportunistic, and when the opportunities come, they have to, for their survival of just the way they live, they have to pounce on that.
And, again, I'm going to make people mad at me, but you're at the local campground, which has a bunch of trails, right? And here, I know this one campground where people claim there's Bigfoot. I'm not going to mention the campground. It's in Washington State, not that far away from me. And, people are saying, oh, look right off the trail, right? Now, this is a gravel trail, by the way. And you look off to the left of it, about 20 feet out. There was like these sticks put together. Oh, that is a Bigfoot shelter. Now, come on, would a Bigfoot realistically build a shelter by a major campground, which people are going up and down this trail to go either to the river or the lake there? No, they're not. I don't believe a Bigfoot's going to put these sticks together. And that don't make sense because you know what? Why would they only put sticks together? Oh, that's their shelter. Now, come on. I really think that they're more intelligent than that. If they're going to make a shelter, they're going to put branches and all this stuff over to give them some protection from the cold, wind, rain. Why would they just what's the purpose of putting sticks together and say, oh, that's a Bigfoot shelter?
Yeah, and plus, listen, they try to avoid mankind, so they're not going to be anywhere close to where there's trails or paths or where there's a high trafficated area because they're trying to avoid us. And why not?
Rory, it's up if you honestly go to Squamish Pass, I think it's Lake Easton. I'm not sure, but if you go to Squamish Pass in Washington, heading towards Yakima, Spokane, it's the first lake after you go, and there's a campground there. I think it's Lake Easton. And if you go there, there's a trail there. And there's been reports of Bigfoot building this stuff, which is come on. That place during the spring and summer, that campground is jam-packed. What I think there is, JC, is a lot of hoaxers out there.
Yeah.
And people are gullible. They see that, oh my God, that's a Bigfoot thing, right?
Right. Yeah, that's true. Now, I did spot not a structure about 3 years ago in the woods, and it was deep in the woods of Salt Fork. I seen what looked like a footprint, couldn't see the toes, but it was, and I looked forward about 20 feet, and there was a sapling, it's probably 6 inches around and 8 foot high. It was twisted and broke and like pulled down, and nothing around it, no other snowfalls, no other breaks. And so, I mean, how do you explain it? It was pretty isolated. It was weird. A lot of reports in the area. I don't know.
Maybe it was pissed off because another Bigfoot was having sex with his mate. So it took its frustration out and tore the tree apart.
That could have been, Gary, very much so. Or, maybe it took one of its them dogs, who knows? Listen, that's just it. We don't know how they think. We think we do because we're humans. We think.
What we do is interpret our thoughts.
Yeah.
And then take that and think that's how they think. Okay, come on. They're not going to think like we are. And I don't believe they can telecommunicate. I am so sorry if I make people mad and ruffle feathers on this one. But anybody that says, well, I'm out in the woods and they telecommunicate with me each time I go out there, you know what? They need to go to their doctor and say, I need some type of medication.
You know what else? Along the same kind of lines, we also think that these ETs or whoever they are and wherever they're from, they're taking the humans, that they think like us too. We often put, well, they think like we think. We think, well, they're doing this and this is why they're doing that. We don't know. You need to throw that theories and that mentality away because it's not true.
How, if you go really, let's go back to when the cavemen were walking around the earth, right? If we all of a sudden go back in time and we run across a caveman, okay, how are they going to look at you and how are you going to look at them? You're going to look at them as nothing more than prehistoric, unintelligent, life that, again, if you think about a race of humanoids or ETs, whatever they are, biological life, and they have to be so much more advanced than us if you get here in the first place. Think about it. They're not going to look at you as, oh, gee, Mr. JC, I think you're a real nice person. They're going to look at you as nothing more than I would go back in time and look at a caveman.
Yeah, they're going to look at me or anybody and think, there's dinner or there's prey or there's a threat or, these are, which is pretty much probably what they would think. Now, again, I'm thinking human to human, but not human to Bigfoot. So I think it could be more accurate. But we don't know. But the bottom line is I wouldn't go up to a caveman, a million years ago or however many years and be all joyful and try to shake his hand.
Well, I'm not comparing them to a Bigfoot. I'm comparing them against ETs. They're going to look at humans as basically savages. They're going to look at us like low life, like the same way we look at the turkey running in the field.
Or how about the ants when you were a kid and you had a little microglass?
Well, yeah, or you had a little ant farm.
Right. What did you do with your glasses, Gary, and an ant?
I don't know. They didn't live very long, I'll tell you that.
you lit them up, didn't you?
No, they died off, and I didn't care. How about all these people that make artwork with these big ant nests? They pour lead and other type of, into the nests to make art out of it.
Well, That's pretty good. That's pretty gruesome. More. I didn't even.
Could you imagine a big ET comes down in Ohio and pours lead over Ohio, and look at this, I got some artwork.
Yeah, let's hang this on the wall.
Yeah, I don't know. People have to look at either ETs or Bigfoot or whatever, cryptids, okay, as nothing more than you can't compare them to what we learned and what we are. They're not us.
No, it's a totally different ball game. And remember, these things aren't empathetic like we are, or they're not. They're just being. I mean, they're living.
Well, if you're out there, right, in South Fork, and you run into Bigfoot, he throws a rock and it hits you in your head, or it hits your friend and it kills your friend. He's not going to come up to you and go, "Oh, I'm sorry."
I know it. No, he's going to be like, well, now I got a rock for you. That's 2 meals. I don't have to do a lot for the next couple of weeks. We got meals for the whole family.
And again, I want to thank everybody out there that's watching us. You know, again, our YouTube channel is probably going to hit by tomorrow 20,000 subscribers. You know, for years, I can't understand, you know, on the apps, and we have millions of listeners, you know, between iHeart, Apple, Spotify, right? But YouTube, I've never, ever pushed it. Really, I just go on to it because I enjoy doing it. Now, for some reason here, back about 13 days ago, either the algorithm with YouTube started sharing us all of a sudden, but we gained 18,000 subscribers. And you know what really I find astounding? They're not all in the United States. Like, we are really popular in places like India, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, New Zealand, Australia. It's in countries I can't even pronounce. And I'm talking huge numbers of people that are, you know, subscribed and from those countries. And I'm getting tons of emails. Some of them I can't even read unless I translate it. Yeah. But maybe they're watching us because it's like a circus. I don't know.
Yeah, we're like their ants farm, where their entertainment, right? So it could be. That's just it. We don't know. We just don't know.
And again, too, you know, we're not asking for donations like but if you want us to keep playing the bumper music we started playing, it is very expensive for the license. We have to pay a lot of money for each play. We can't just keep playing that song. I have to buy a license for each time I play it. So if anybody wants to go onto YouTube, and just on YouTube, they can just, you know, donate right on YouTube, and it goes into Google, and then we eventually get paid after they take their cut. But I shouldn't have said that. But anyway, that's the truth. But you know, again, you know, that would help offset for the costs of, you know, putting on the music. You know, we have accomplished something. I was talking to a radio station director today of a station that's considering also carrying our show. And he was amazed. He goes, "How many people are involved with your show?" And I said, 3.5 people. I'm the engineer. I do all the, you know, production and make sure everything goes smooth. I interview, I do that. And then JC finds the guest. And sometimes I twist his arm to have him find guests. But we do a lot. And, you know, for the amount of listeners we have on the app side, and now, you know, the people as described to us on YouTube, he was so amazed that the staff I have, what we have accomplished. And, you know, the more I think about it, we have accomplished a lot, JC.
Yeah, let me tell you something. Sometimes I'm amazed.
Yeah, I'm more than amazed. I mean, every time I go on YouTube and see the new subscription thing, I'm going, oh my God. I know other shows that's been out there for 13 years that only have like 25,000. And the rate we're going by next week, we'll have probably more than that.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much 2-3 people can do what sometimes some of these shows got 20 people, 30 people doing.
Well, you know, one advantage I have, okay, I'll be honest with you, I've been in broadcasting all my life.
That's a big one.
So I know how to engineer my show. I know how to put it all together to make it flow and sound just as good as that big one. Or at least I try to. But again, all the people out there, you know, all the new subscribers and people like, well, Tom from Metatron Power and Light, Rory, and December, and Barb, June, or whatever she's calling herself. I want to, you know, again, they've been here the whole time. And I want to thank them too, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They've been here. That's right.
So, who's your next guest on your show?
Oh, my next guest coming up on the 29th of May will be Sharice Williams. She is a witch, and she's going to discuss how she handles haunted objects and ghost hunting and all that kind of stuff from a witch's perspective.
Is she ever worried about being burned on the stake?
Well, you have to tune in to find out that one. Maybe she was. Maybe she was in a past life. We don't know.
So you can find JC not on YouTube, but you just go on to and type in Night Dreams Talk Radio, and that is 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Just go on to Speaker, or you know, if you can't catch Speaker when he's on live, go on to Apple, go on to TuneIn, iHeart, or whatever, and listen to his show and give a review, you know, of his show, because I'm sure he'd like to see some good reviews.
But yeah, always looking for some good reviews, that's for sure. But yes, it's a good show taking off, and one thing about it, I'm always looking forward to do it, and I always have tried different exciting guests that cover different views from ghost hunting to whatever, you know.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I just can't get into ghost hunting, but I know there's people out there that just like Bigfoot or UFOs. I mean, my thing is why I don't get into ghost hunting. I'll be honest with you. For the last 20 years, you know, if you go back to the early cable shows and stuff like that, Fox and all that, yes, they just did so much, you know, ghost hunting stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's like anything else. You flood the market, it gets polluted. It's just like, listen, 5 years ago, there was way less podcasts than today. So the ponds get diluted or so much, it's just
I wish you wouldn't have mentioned podcasts. You know, there is over 1 million podcasts.
That's my point. Yeah.
Yeah. And for us to be where we are in the ratings, I'm shocked. But again, I'll be honest with you. People think they can do a show. And you know what? There is a opening. There is a area, you know, for anybody. If you can be sitting at your kitchen table and having your dinner and want to do a podcast, I'm sure you'll have an audience that'll sit there and eat right with you.
Yeah, that's right. And
or sit in your recliner and interview people while you're eating a sandwich and your wife walks by. I'm amazed, I'll be honest with you. You know, I worked hard to get where I'm at all these years. And, you know, Art Bell, I talked to him a few days before he passed on. Oh, God, I don't want to go there. But, you know, one of the reasons why he decided to hang up, again, you know, he hung up his show a couple times. One major hang up was because of family problems. I'm not going to get into that. But he thought that, gee, the internet is going to be the way of the future for talk radio. And the problem is, it was, and it is 1 million wide. 1 million wide. So you're not competing against just a couple. You're competing against 1 million or more. And what's really bad is I was reading an article. The new cars coming out next year, they want to get rid of the AM, FM, and have satellite and internet radio.
Oh, yeah.
You know, again, so what's that going to do for the life of AM radio stations and FM stations 20 years from now? Because I'll be honest with you, how many people go at home and turn on the radio and listen to it? Now statistics say most people is drive time going to work and coming home. or when they're in their car, or truckers. But that's all changing because of the internet. Of course, if we get hit by a big solar flare, it won't matter anyway.
That's right. And the radio station is going to be right there with the newspapers, pretty much obsolete.
Yeah. I don't know. Is it what newspapers really still exist anymore? Except small community ones. I mean, God, I was shocked when Seattle Times and the Seattle PI and LA Times and all these newspapers just were gone. They're just now internet.
Yep, everything's internet. It's all obsolete, pretty much.
Yeah, I remember the day I couldn't wait till the paper boy would deliver the paper. I would grab it and go in the bathroom and sit down. And, my wife would yell at me, "What are you doing in the bathroom? What do you think I'm doing?" No, actually, I was reading the newspaper. That was the only place I could get away from the kids.
Not no more. Forget it.
No newspapers. No place. That's another thing. You go out camping, right? You don't have newspapers anymore to start your fire.
No, you don't. Or put it in your bird cages.
Yeah, you want some birds?
No.
Yeah. Well, everybody out there, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. Again, let your friends know about us. If you haven't hit that bell, you can subscribe to the channel. But if you don't hit that bell, you're not notified when we go on live. So it's very important to hit that bell. So if you even subscribed, just go on there and just hit that bell, and then you'll be notified every time we go live. Well, everybody, I want you to be safe over this holiday. Drive safe, because there's going to be a lot of people that maybe are a little bit impaired out there. And be careful and enjoy the 3-day weekend. Until next week, when JC is on Wednesday and I'm on Thursday. By the way, before I go, who's my guest next Thursday and Friday?
Well, you have a double feature. First, we have Marcus Allen talking about pyramids. Then Cody Lundine's going to come on. Second guest, he's a world-renowned survivalist on TV, many TV cable shows. So you'll know him when you see him. And then next Friday, we have Betsy Lewis coming on. She has written a whole book on many different abduction cases. Yeah, written a book on many abduction cases, followed up by John Kachuba on shapeshifters.
That's going to be interesting. Tomorrow, we have David Long from Omega Car Center Repair Centers, and we're going to be talking about people that get scammed when they go into the repair shop. You got to watch the repair shop. Again, you're taking the recommendation and whatever they tell you is wrong with your car, and sometimes you don't have that, and you could end up there taking your car in there for a tune-up, and they come back and say it's going to cost you $8,000. Perfect example. Now I have for me, now we have other cars, but I still have a 2008 Scion. I love the car. I just love it. It has almost 300,000 miles on it. I took it in a couple weeks ago to a local shop. And I said, I just need a tune-up. Now, I just had brakes put on it. I had everything that could be done. I had it checked over, and they said that car would probably go another 100,000 miles. And, I had a problem when I took it in there also, that the hood wouldn't stay down. So the guy was nice and gracious enough, and he fixed the latch. He took a screwdriver and bent it, and he said, now it works. And I said, okay, well, how much for a tune-up? Well, he then called another mechanic over. They're looking at the motor. And then I said, well, how much would it cost? Oh, you need this, you need that. We need to service your transmission, your differential. You need new boots on your, and I go, okay, well, how much? About $8,000. Now, most of that stuff was already done. So you got to be careful when you take your car into a shop, because you can get scammed. We're also going to talk about tomorrow with Dave Long what new car or used car you should not buy. There's some pickup trucks. There's some out there that are going to be dogs. They're going to crap out on you way before even 100,000 miles. And there's certain cars out there that have a certain warranty on it, 50,000 or 100,000. And as soon as you hit that, that's a throwaway car. That's when everything craps out. So we're going to be talking about that tomorrow. Everybody have a good one. And again, thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you on the other side of the campground next Thursday.
Who's friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's talk show radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there.